Welcome to Create, Build, Manage, the Entrepreneur's Toolbox. Here's your host, Scott Miller.
My guests tonight are Toni Brinker. She is the founder and CEO of One Community USA and the Chief of Police for the city of Arlington, Texas, Chief Al Jones. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Toni, I want to start with you. I want to talk about the mission of your foundation and why we are here tonight.
The mission of our foundation is to build cities of opportunities for everyone. That involves our wonderful law enforcement and community stakeholders. So bringing those two groups together is key critical to creating a better world for everyone.
It's quite a lofty goal, and you were on our daily show earlier this month, and we kind of talked about that. Mm-hmm. Just real kind of quick for people that are meeting you for the first time, why this passion? Because you could have done anything. Mm-hmm. You could be enjoying the beach somewhere, enjoying a nice trip to Europe, and here you are rolling your sleeves up and working.
That's so true. Well, this all started basically with my late husband, who started a restaurant chain as known as Brinker International. But I saw the philanthropic effort that he made on a daily basis and how that transcended into his employees. So he may be taking them down to be at a food kitchen or whatever, but he felt that that was the best way to build a great culture within a corporation and then expand it at the same time. Over and above that, I witnessed a march on the streets in New York City in 2014 late, and that is the first time that I ever heard, "What do you want, dead cops? When do you want them? Right now." And so I made 2 back-to-back calls, one to our mayor and one to our police chief, and said, we need to be doing something differently. We have a serious problem in this country. So that's kind of the birth of One Community USA.
And then you have the Build Away Crime Program. What's that about?
The Build Away Crime Program is really patterned after what law enforcement does now, but bringing our community stakeholders together and the youth to work hand in glove with law enforcement across the United States. Community-based programs that cause bridges of trust to be built, because sometimes we don't have them, and that creates a unity. And then what happens is your business owners and your citizens become key critical in helping support the great work of law enforcement, but they become leaders in their community, and then that's paid forward into the community, so everyone wins.
Now, Chief Jones, I'm curious what your reaction was when you picked up your phone and there's Toni Brinker, or perhaps outside of your office and there's Toni Brinker. What was your reaction when you first met Toni and heard her passion and heard her heart?
You know, I think I was probably about 4 months into the job, so I'm still trying to learn the city of Arlington. But Toni came to the office, we sat down, and she says, Chief, I have an idea. I want you to take a part of this One Community USA. So we talked about what it was about. And I instantly said, you know what, I'm all in. It's something that we need to do as a city, we need to do as a policing profession. It's about really engaging our community to the best that we possibly can. And I think partner up with One Community is allowing us to do that. And I'm really fortunate enough that she chose Arlington to come here to actually bring the program.
Now, you've been in law enforcement, it says since 1995, is that correct?
That is correct. I started my law enforcement career in Baltimore County. I worked my way up to the second ranking person in the agency. After 25 years, I realized it was time to find something else, and I was fortunate enough to come to Arlington and get this job.
That's great. That's great. So you've seen a lot in your career as far as relationship between the community and law enforcement. You certainly can speak uniquely to what we've seen and the problem that Toni was mentioned she saw in New York. So speak to that from your perspective. Is it something that's getting better? Is it getting worse?
Well, let me say this. Being 25 years in law enforcement, we have been tasked to do a lot of different things that we shouldn't have been doing. And a lot of it is animal control issues. Now we're into the mental health profession. Now we're into all these different areas that I'm not sure if we have the true expertise to be there. But it's put on our shoulders, and we do what we do as cops. And if they say, hey, we need you to do that, that's how we respond. But I can tell you, just looking at what's been happening across the country, the relationship between police and communities, some of them is fragmented. What I'm going to say is it's not every community.
Right.
So, we probably have about a 5%, maybe 7% of our community who we don't have a relationship with. And this is what this is about. We have to find ways to go into those communities, break down those walls, build those bridges. But what I'm going to say is sometime we can't do it by ourselves, and we need partners to help us get into those communities. When you have partners working with you, it's so much easier to build a relationship with communities that really don't trust us as much.
That makes sense. And when you say 5 to 7%, I appreciate you putting a number to that. We've talked about before, working in media. I'm going to speak to my profession. We tend to fan the flames. We tend to talk about the negative. We tend to be a part of the problem, not part of the solution. I could say that, right? And so let's talk about what the solution is. So your vision, because you've done some pretty unique things. Like you're not just talking the talk, you're walking the walk. And I'm trying to picture this, and television doesn't do it justice, but here we have Toni Brinker, small, petite lady, going into some really rough neighborhoods and having some tough conversations. Talk about that.
Oh, and that is a true statement. So I have been in more than one conversation where I can hear gunshots going off in the background. You're used to that, but I can tell you I was not. But going into the neighborhoods and actually seeing what people are experiencing on a daily level, that also is employees of companies. They sometimes experience these things. Allowed me to put together programs with quantitative and qualitative data points tracked by universities so that at the end of a specific year or something, I can take a report back to the chief, because how would you gauge numerically that trust has been created?
That's right.
So I have to do this, and I have to tie it back to economic development. And from a business company's perspective, again, I'm a businesswoman as well, I want to be able to expand my business and hire more people. I want to do it from neighborhoods where maybe they deserve an extra break.
Right.
So that means that I might actually put, in my case, or in Brinker International's case, a restaurant in a neighborhood, but it has to be safe. So in order for it to be safe, we need the good help from law enforcement. Law enforcement needs our help because they can't police a community to safety, because then it appears to be too heavy-handed. And a community, citizens, we may think we can do everything. We can't. We always look to the fellows in blue to handle the problems that we don't know how to handle. So if you bring the two groups together, you can make a difference. But walking the walk and talking the talk took me about 2 years to get a really good idea that the same problems in Baltimore, even Baltimore County, are the same in LA, same in Phoenix, same in Chicago, same in North Texas. People want to feel safe. And they have to have that to be able to grasp the American dream. Both sides need each other. So this one community is the bridge to bring both of them together. So we start this initial healing process, and this process where people get their voices heard, they have some value, and then they get involved. And they can help reduce crime by just feeling comfortable enough to call Chief Jones or people on his staff and say, we have an issue over here. And I trust you now to tell you that there's an issue, rather than you coming in and me saying, no problem, or nothing.
Right. And you're speaking to something that I think every human wants. Mm-hmm. Everyone wants to live in a place they feel safe. right, Chief Jones? It's not just one group of people. We all want to be safe.
No, I think everybody wants safety. They want to feel safe in their community. This is one thing that I've learned since being in the business for so long. People won't play, they won't live, and they won't shop in a place they don't feel safe. And we have to make sure that we're providing that safety for them. But what I'm going to say is we can't do it alone.
Right.
Crime is not a policing issue. Crime is a community issue. And if we can actually work together, and it has to be more than just us and the community, it has to be the faith-based leaders, it has to be the school system, it has to be the hospitals, it has to be business. They have to all take part or have ownership in this, and we all have to sit at this table to figure out what problem that we're trying to solve, and we can solve it together, especially if we put the smart people in the room. We can get it done. It's just a matter of, are they willing to sit at the table to get it done?
It's an interesting topic, and we have you for the whole hour to talk about this. So we're going to dive into it, some specifics, some things that are going on, and we're also going to address how you and the business community can get involved. You have a responsibility as well. Stick around. This is Create, Build, and Manage. Visiting this hour with Toni Brinker as well as Chief Al Jones. And we were talking that last segment, and I want to kind of dive into it a little bit more. This connection between the business community and law enforcement. And I think, and really I'll throw this out there for both of you, I think often, and you address this as well, we tend to look at law enforcement as, let me give you everything I don't want to handle. Right? I don't want to handle that dog. I don't want to handle this person. You know, rather than walking over and having a conversation with my neighbor, I'll just call you and let you deal with it. And that happens a lot. So as a business community is watching this and they're thinking, well, how does this relate to my cash flow and hiring employees and marketing my business? But you make an interesting connection between safe communities and success in business.
Oh, no question about it. And a lot of people really don't they don't connect the dots. You cannot put an asset, and I'll use the restaurant industry or grocery store. Typically, they are not put in neighborhoods that are not safe. So in a restaurant, we are aware that the possibility that someone may burn the facility down. We also are quite aware that food products get stolen probably.
Right.
Excuse me, food products do get stolen. So I'm very aware that someone might be cooking a steak and it may go out to a patron, but there might be another steak that's put inside a pocket, and then when they have a break, they may go sell it to someone or maybe take it home and feed a small child. I hope the latter.
Right.
But we have a fiduciary responsibility to the people that we employ and the customers that we have. So safety is key critical when you make a decision in terms of where you're going to put a business, if you're going to expand, and how you're going to do it. So you have to take care of your employees, and they need to feel comfortable. Otherwise, they won't come to work, and then obviously you won't have a thriving business. So again, safety is important. The other thing that is also key critical is making sure that the employees know that they're valued. So corporations need to be uber sensitive to supporting causes that their employees can relate to. One of the things, if you are born in an underserved community and then you are able to get a good education and move yourself out of a community for whatever reason, you may still have relatives who live in an underserved community.
That's right.
So these employees need to know that the guy in the corner office relates to them. And a good way to do that is through community engagement, neighborhood building programs that integrate law enforcement, because then again, you bring the two sides needed to create a better world together.
And you mentioned about how you partnering with faith leaders and schools. What about businesses? How do businesses help you? How can the business community come alongside and help what you're doing?
So we actually really work well with the Police Foundation, the Arlington Police Foundation here. They have been an extreme great partner for us. Unfortunately, in law enforcement and government, maybe our budgets aren't as big as we would like, and we can't get some of the items or some of the things that we need as to do our job really well.
Right.
Whether it's training for our officers or even assisting in funding youth programs, the foundation and the business community, they come together and they say, hey, listen, what do you need? And they'll go out and they'll make sure that they provide us funding for us. So those are the things that's how they help us. The other way they help us is they actually are our biggest supporters. You know, they want to make sure that we're doing well, because if we're doing well, they're doing well. And it's about making sure that we're growing our tax base here in Arlington. We want to make sure that our businesses feel comfortable coming here to open up headquarters and opening up plants. Because I said before, if they don't feel safe, they're not coming.
And you have a unique position because, you know, people, Arlington, Texas, we know it well. We do our show here in Arlington. But for those in Los Angeles and Boston, they're like, Arlington, where's that at again? So Arlington, I mean, you're the 46th largest law enforcement agency in the U.S. People don't realize how big Arlington is. It's where the Dallas Cowboys play. It's where the Texas Rangers play. And so you've got a lot. In addition to this, you have a lot of guests that are coming in. So you're responsible for a lot. And I'm guessing you don't have a very large department, meaning, you know, it's not like you can be everywhere at the same time. So you need that support to help you, right?
Absolutely. Our agency is about 900 strong. That's between sworn and non-sworn members. You know, we cover 98 square miles. We are, which I like, we are the 8th most diverse city in the country. And I think that's important because you want to make sure that you're engaging everybody in the community. You want everybody to feel that they're a part of the police department. Unfortunately, we can't be everywhere. We can't be everywhere in this city. So we need our communities to be the eyes and ears for us. We need their partnership. We need their relationship. And we need them to actually give us a call when they see something wrong. And I think that's how we get it done.
It makes sense. It makes sense. And so you've been going into barber shops. Have you done that in Arlington yet?
We have.
You have? Tell me that story.
Oh, this is wonderful. So when I talked to Chief Jones about it, I said we have this absolutely wonderful barbershop program and beauty salon, because you don't want to leave the women out.
Okay.
So we have the corresponding course to that also is called Una Comunidad, which is in the Hispanic community. So Shop Talk is primarily in the African American community. So engaging minority-owned business leaders who have taken the big step to start a business in maybe some areas that are really underserved, but to give them the support, allow the law enforcement to come in and have these very, very hard conversations, because that's usually what happens in the beginning, about, well, what does a law enforcement do? Do you have any bad officers? How do you report the officers? Why is it that I always get stopped when my son and I drive through XYZ zip code? So it allows, through One Community USA, an opportunity for Chief Jones and his officers to say, now let's talk about that. And you're in a business environment, and these owners are usually considered pillars in their community. So it's this safe environment where also the youth get involved, and you get to see each other from each other's perspective. That's where you bring in or build bridges of trust and create unity.
What's the hardest question you've been asked?
Well, pretty much traffic stops. Traffic stops are everything because we do that more. It's high frequency for us. So more people get pulled over. Why did I get pulled over? And they just don't understand that. But I can tell you a funny story from being in one of the barbershops, actually a couple of them. So it's been new here to Arlington. So when we're going to places that we normally don't go, you know, people will look, okay, what's going on? Are they doing a search warrant here, or
right.
they're doing, you know, so their customers are coming in and they're doing about face and say, man, I'm in the wrong place. So we have to go grab them and say, hey, you know what? No, you're not in the wrong place. And this is how the conversation starts. When you saw me in the barbershop, what was your first thought? And that's how the dialogue began,
Gotcha.
so that they understand we're not here because of crime. We're here to try to build a relationship. And once you actually have that conversation for an hour and a half and they are able to ask you anything, they start building that trust and they want you to be in that barbershop. And that's what we've been experiencing over the last year.
We've been talking about One Community USA. The website, if you want to find out more information about Toni Brinker's organization, is onecommunityusa.org. You see it there on your screen. We're going to be right back. We're going to have a more conversation, and I'm going to ask, what questions should we be asking in the community? Stick around. This is Create, Build, and Manage. Welcome back to Create, Build, and Manage. We're talking this hour about the serious issue of law enforcement and their relation in the community and how we can improve that and improve relationship as it relates to business as well. And my guest this hour, Toni Brinker, and Chief from Arlington, Texas, Chief Jones. And I kind of gave you a little clue what I wanted to talk about going into that, because I think there's questions we should be asking as a community that we are uncomfortable asking. So I'm going to throw it out there to the table. What questions should we be asking? Who wants to go first?
You want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. I think one of the questions that everybody really wants to know is, why do we use force on some of our calls? Because that's where we see all of the protesting. That's where we see all of the things that are negative that the media portrays for us. But sometimes they're valid, right? So we have to have that conversation, and we do here in Arlington. Why do we use force? Why do we, because I know one of the first questions they always say is, why can't you shoot the gun out of a person's hand? But that's not how we're trained. We're trained to stop the threat, whatever that threat may be. But we have to have that conversation so that everybody understands. We're not waking up in the morning and saying, hey, I'm going out there and shoot somebody, because that's not what we want our community to think about us. But the other part of it is, and I've been saying it since I've been here, is that there has to be some type of piece of compliance as well. Because the whole responsibility can't be just on the police. If I'm asking you to stop doing what you're doing, if you stop doing what you're doing, then maybe we can actually work the problem out together, and then we can get rid of the force. But it's really truly about making sure that the community understands. The other thing I think it's important to ask is, what should I do on a traffic stop? Because that's where we see most of the time where we're dealing with our citizens. So you got to have that conversation. Make sure you keep your hands on the wheel. Make sure you turn the dome light on. Make sure you don't make any further moves while the officer's making contact with you. Once the officer makes contact with you. So all of those different things I think the community needs to ask, and we have to be able to actually explain it to them, because that's when the light bulbs start to click, where they start understanding what we are and what we're about.
You mentioned working with educators. Is this something that is being talked about in assemblies in high school when the kids start to drive? Is that something you guys are addressing?
Yes, and we're working it, and it's right now we're working on a video, and I can't wait for it to come out. It is what you should do if you get a traffic stop by an officer, so that the kids understand, so that we're taking it. Taking the message to the community. And it's not just about the kids, it's about everybody, because we get some grown adults who 60, 70 years old who still don't want to comply with us. So it's about educating everybody, and that's what we're trying to do, educate about how to work with us to keep everybody safe.
A lot of what's come out of this has been the issues, the names that we know, George Floyd. And while Arlington's not been perfect in its history, you've not had the headlines that other cities have had. What do you do proactively with your officers to really continue to train them to prevent that from happening? Because, that officer, wherever the community is, they didn't wake up expecting to be headlines that day. That's on you, right?
Right. So, what we implemented is the 21st century policing strategies. We actually looked at the 6 pillars. We want to make sure that, we're building trust and legitimacy in our community. We are teaching our officers procedural justice. So those things are ingrained in our culture. And I think that that's important. The other thing is that we're very transparent in Arlington. We try to share as much information as we can with our media, with our communities, but we also want to make sure we're sharing information with our officers because we don't want them to not know what's going on. So here's the other thing too. So what we're working on is a 7-year strategic plan here in Arlington, and it's focused around these areas here. So it's called TREAT, the acronym TREAT. If we treat people with dignity and respect, we can build trust. So the T is for transparency. We want to be transparent in everything that we're doing. The R is for respect. We want to make sure we're respecting our community, make sure that we're treating them with dignity and respect. We want to engage them. We want to engage them on every level possible. We want, as I said, we have the 8th diverse city in the country. We want to make sure everybody feels a part of Arlington Police Department. And we also have to have that accountability piece. We have to make sure we're measuring how successful we are. And then the last piece is not only training, which you talked about, making sure we're training our officer properly, but also making sure that we're educating and training our communities. And those are the areas that we're focusing on. And I think if we can actually continue on that path, I think we're going to build a lot of trust here in Arlington.
That's great. Wow, that's great. Great stuff.
These are the same questions that my officers, again, who are retired, that work in Stop Talk, they are retired former police officers. They now see everything from the citizen side, and so they'll typically show up at Shop Talk, Una Comunidad, and we also have a reentry and a diversion program. So when we're talking through this, many times the officers will go, "Is there any question that you want to ask Chief Jones when he comes in?" And the barber will go, "Well, I think I'd like to ask him." It's a good question. Go ahead. "You think I can?" He said, "Yes, absolutely. This is the right time to do it." So it's always about traffic stops, maybe something that happened particularly with George Floyd. We had in the cities where we were working, we actually had long conversations about George Floyd. And when many of those conversations ended, our barbershop owners would say, "My gosh, we should have been doing this all the time.
Wow.
When are you coming back?" And we get the same thing for our salon owners. They seem to have sometimes different issues. Their issues are, "I don't want to close at 5 o'clock on the afternoon because I'm too scared to leave my salon because many times the youth fill up the parking lot." So we're able to, through those conversations, notify jurisdiction and say, if you haven't had any calls, then you might want to send a black and white around. And so this will help that female keep her business open for 2 extra hours, so she'll make additional money. Her employees will make additional money. So it becomes a win-win for everyone.
We have on the table today a ribbon that you brought in, which is really, really nice. Why don't you talk about this and what it symbolizes?
Well, this is what we call a unity ribbon. So the yellow down the middle represents citizens. That's you and me. Okay, and the blue on either side are first responders that are here to protect us, like Chief Jones and his officers. A first responder, incidentally, the definition is anyone who's taken an oath to serve and protect. So included in the law enforcement category, you're also going to have your city council. They've done it. Your teachers have become first responders. People now know because of COVID that nurses and doctors are first responders. So what we try to remind people is that those who are in the blue happen to be citizens. They may live right next to you. They just get up and put on a uniform. I put on a dress, but we are still one. And that those of us in the yellow sometimes become a first responder. There was a young man who was killed in the Parkland High School shooting. He saved 6 of his friends. He didn't go to school that day deciding that he was going to be a first responder, but at that young, tender age, he did become one. So that is why we call these unity ribbons. We like to work with police departments, get everyone, including media, to come out, church leaders, barbershop owners, salon owners, businesses. This is where employees can get involved. We wrap neighborhoods so that when you have a police officer going home at night, he's worked deep nights. He is dead tired. He drives by a house that's got this ribbon on it. he knows that the people in there, they may not know him and he may not know them, but we all want one thing, and that is to live safe. We want to be one community. And it is a visual branding way of saying, let's do better.
How does this make you feel when you see this?
It's special. It's special. It really shows that, there is community out there that really appreciate what we do. There are community out there that really want to partner up with us. And I can tell you just, from being an officer, when we hear those things, because nobody, think about this, they don't usually call us when they're having a birthday party, right?
Right.
They're calling us when they're at their worst. And just to see something like that saying, hey, we accept you, we accept what you do, and we love what you do, that makes me feel good.
That's good. That's a good point. I kind of use the, football analogy. You're kind of like the offensive line of the city, right? Mm-hmm. The only time you ever get mentioned is usually negative news, not the positive news.
Exactly.
People aren't saying thank you for keeping the streets safe. Hey, I went to that football game. There was no incident. Mm-hmm. I go to church here in Arlington, Texas, and there's about 3 of your officers that are keeping our campus safe every Sunday morning. There's constant things that we don't think about. So we got about 20 seconds, so we're going to pick up the conversation when we come back on that. By the way, we've been visiting with Chief Jones. The website is arlingtonpd.org is who he represents, arlingtonpd.org. Stick around. This is Create, Build, and Manage. We'll be back after this. With Toni Brinker. She is a founder and CEO of One Community USA, an organization that is really working to connect the community with law enforcement. And then we also have the police chief of Arlington, Texas, Chief Jones, with us. Toni, this is one of these topics that, and we said this last time, which is why we invited you for a weekend show. We could probably spend hours on this topic and still not even scratch the surface. So as we kind of begin to wrap it up, I really want to give people action items that they can walk away with. So let's start from the business perspective. People that own a business, run a business, what would you want them to walk away from this conversation?
Okay, so I have 2 things.
Okay.
One, to all your business owners, you need to move to Arlington, Texas, because you've got a great chief, okay, and he understands the connection. 2, for those of you, you need to make sure that the HR department in your company gets actively engaged in community engagement. And by that, I mean understand what your employees want. They may look like you, but their concerns about what's happening in the United States may not be the same as the person that works at the C-suite level. And so by talking to them about serious contemporary issues is very important, but also giving them the opportunity to get involved with law enforcement, to come and get, like in our case, come to a shop talk. We renovate one barbershop or salon in each jurisdiction every year.
Wow.
And it is so cool to see a corporation that comes in and says, I want to do that. Let me make a donation, or my people want to come in there and help renovate. And we typically will do the thing that sits on the back of a barbershop chair.
Okay.
We'll put their emblem, their company's emblem there, so that every time someone gets to get their hair cut, they are able to see their corporation. If I'm an employee, that lets me know that the owner of that company, whether they're based in Sweden or wherever, truly understands my concerns. That makes me a better employee. So having hard conversations are necessary. With the programs that Chief Jones has and that we have, you get not only to talk about it, but you have actionable items where that means getting involved. And by doing that, you don't care what the guy next to you looks like a football game. I don't care if the guy next to me is a cop. I don't care who he is. I don't care if he's black, white, brown, whatever. I'm still pulling for my team. That's what we have to do in our community.
And just to back up what you're saying, we're seeing market research where people, even this younger generation particularly, my kids' generation, they care more about what the CEO thinks on issues than ever before. Like when I was growing up, I didn't care what the CEO of Coca-Cola thought. There was no discussion what the CEO of Disney thought. Thanks, but that is something that's very important. So I think business leaders do have to think about that. They have to be mindful that not only their employees, but also their customers care what they think about.
Well, let me leave you with one final thought. These young kids do not need to get involved with causes that destroy America. Right. So we want our business leaders to give to causes that actually build things in America, and also don't cause hatred. So getting involved in positive build away crime programs, 21st century community building programs, that is important. Everyone wins in that scenario.
I'm going to give you an opportunity for the viewer that's watching at home. Obviously, they have different opinions on law enforcement in general. What's the one message you would want anybody to walk away from this conversation knowing about law enforcement?
So I think the important thing that they really need to know is we're human. We're no different than them. We put our pants on one leg at a time just like they do. Unfortunately, because we wear a certain uniform, we are painted a certain way. And they have to start trying to move away from that. We are truly out there to be their partner, to be their friend, to help mentor their kids, because we do that in the schools. So we do a lot of things that people don't think about, all the things that we do, whether it's from mentoring, we do social work, we do mental health, taking care of people through mental health. We do a lot. And I want them to understand, when we go out every day and we're out on patrol, we're out there to serve and to make the community much better, much safer. That's the bottom line.
That's great. And your BlueFit program, that's a cool program you've started with your law enforcement.
Yeah, so one of the pillars for the 21st century policing is making sure you have officer wellness program. We have been doing a fantastic job here in Arlington, making sure that we're taking care of our officers. Not only do we have the BlueFit program, but we have a Blue Chip program too, and I'll explain the difference between both. The Blue Chip program, our officers, we can issue them a Blue Chip where they can go and seek anonymous treatment from any clinician that is under our service provider for us. They can go there and it's all confidential, where they can go in and see someone and talk about whatever issues that they may have. And that is the first in the country for a program like that. The second program is the BlueFit. We actually just hired on an instructor, a fitness instructor for the agency. She works for our staff. She puts our about 25, 30 officers through a program. I think it's about 10-week program, 10 weeks, where they actually are doing exercise, learning how to eat right, doing all the things that really take care of them and making sure that they're able to serve our community. What I do know is if our officers aren't well, they're not going to be able to do positive things in our community. And we have to make sure that we're taking care of them and treating them and making sure that they're getting the help they need if they need that help.
That's great.
One other thing I'll add is there is a large percentage of first responders in law enforcement who are former veterans. So for those companies that are veteran focused, getting involved in programs like this not only helps the employees because it gives them an opportunity to get involved, but also it speaks to the needs that many of our veterans have. They serve the country, they came back, they want to serve again. So that's the reason why we have such a high percentage of veterans in law enforcement.
Got about 60 seconds. I want you to speak to the person who is at home who, like you, could choose anything. Maybe it's time for them to step up and get involved. What would you tell them?
I would tell them, don't waste any time. Give me a call. We would love to have a lot of people in this world that say that America is worth fighting for, and that we also need to support our wonderful law enforcement as well as our community. So if they want to make America better, they just need to get up off their couch, place a phone call, because I can assure you I've got them on my team as of tomorrow.
That's great. I remember when you first time, you told me the mayor of Dallas said, what are you going to do about it? And you're like, little old me? Well, here you are, you're doing something about it. Toni, I appreciate it. I appreciate you bringing this topic to our attention. Chief Jones, thank you for your time as well. And appreciate you tuning in. This is a topic that we need to continue to have the conversation. It's not just 1 hour of television. We need to continue to have the conversation on TV as well as in your community. Thanks so much for watching. This is Create, Build, and Manage.